Okay, I'm going to show you how to do an analysis of the daylight in your apartment or your home, wherever you live. So let's start again. Here, yet again, is my home. So this time what I'm going to try and do is, again, take one room and show you how you can do this in two ways. The first way is using Ecotect directly. To understand daylight levels, and the second way is using a plugin to Ecotect, a thing called Radiance, which gives fairly cool looking images, which also are really useful in terms of taking this really to the next level. So you will have seen all of that in the tutorial, in the workshop, but here's how to do it in the comfort of your own homes. So we're going to start off by picking our room. I will use, as I did before, this facility to allow me to cut away a section. I'm just going to do it through the bedroom here. So, as before, the model that you've built should have windows. Those windows should be transparent. You know that they're transparent because you'll be able to see through them. And obviously when it comes to daylighting, that transparency is absolutely critical. So we're going to look at this room here and we're going to ask ourselves what is the daylighting levels in that room. So the Ecotect way. We'll start off by isolating our internal walls. If you remember in the previous tutorial, I isolated all of those. I'm going to turn off everything except the internal walls. I'll leave those. Okay, so there we go, internal walls. What I'm going to do is I'm going to define what's called an analysis grid. Now, analysis grid is something Ecotect uses to limit where it does its calculations. In this instance, we're looking at calculations for daylight. So I'm going to tell Ecotect where I want it to limit its calculations to, and that is this room here. So I'm going to pick the floor plate of that room. Now, as I try and click on it, yeah, you guys might have realized that Ecotect's a bit stupid sometimes and it picks the wrong thing. Little hint for you: when you pick close to the thing you want to pick, but it still picks the wrong thing, if you press spacebar, it will then toggle between the things you actually wanted to pick. In this case, the floor plate. Now, having picked the floor plate, what I'm going to do is I'm now going to assign a grid to that. This little blue square here on the right, here, which is analysis grid, that allows me to define a grid. So we're going to define a grid which is display analysis grid first. When I display an analysis grid, it just puts any old grid anywhere. We've got to fit it into the object that we are interested in this case the floor of the bedroom. So I'm going to say auto fit grid to objects. This dialog opens up. We've already selected object, that is the floor of my bedroom, so that's fine. And we can leave pretty much everything else. But I will say one thing which is important, which is this offset here. This is a kind of fairly key figure because very often when you're looking at daylighting, a big question is daylighting where? And generally we take the surface of a table as the most useful place to measure daylighting because it's unlikely you're going to be reading the newspaper on the floor or on the ceiling, so it makes sense to do it at an offset from the floor of 600 mil, i.e. the level of a table. So I'm going to press OK to that, and now my grid shrinks to inside that room where I have defined the grid for. I'm going to turn on everything again, which is again by pressing F4, and just to confirm, I'll just go into visualize. There, everything is on. Now I can see my grid inside my room, and again I can see it's at 600 mil. Actually, truth be told, it's not at 600 mil, it's at 400 mil because my apartment has a 200 mil step in it. So let's just edit the grid there. I'm going to do the offset to 800. It moves up. Just check. Okay, now it's at 600 mil. Okay, so we've got a grid in place. And now we want to work out some calculations to find out what kind of daylighting is at that level, the 600 mil we've defined. a couple of ways you can do this. Within Ecotect, it's possible to calculate daylighting, but I have to say my experience of Ecotect daylighting isn't very positive. It doesn't look very good either, so the results are sometimes a bit dodgy, and the graphic outcome is not great. So, and the other reason I don't want to do it that way is because you've all imported your models, I assume, from Rhino. That also causes some difficulty when you try and do it through Ecotect directly. So we're just going to do it using another thing called Radiance. Now, Radiance is much more accurate and much more interesting, I think. Now, I'm just going to have to show you this because I have installed on the Dropbox. If we go, I shall just open up the AA blog, www.aa-ts-environment.com. Now, the place we want to go to is week 3 downloads. So week 3 downloads. www.aa-ts-environment.com/week3-downloads/. Now, in there, I haven't filled this up yet, but is a file called radiance.rar. That's a file you're going to need in order to run Radiance. So if you copy that onto your desktops and unpackage it, to a very specific place. The place you must put this is on C Radiance. If it's not on C Radiance, it won't work. Now, I have to say I'm not sure how that's going to work out for you Mac users, but let's give it a go. If it doesn't work, we'll have to figure out something else. But for those of you who aren't using Mac, C Radiance is where you've got to put this. So in your C drive, when you open Radiance, there are the things you should have in the folder: bin, doc, lib, obj, and ray. Nothing else, nothing more. Okay, if you've done that, let's go back to Ecotect. Okay, so we're back in Ecotect, and I'm now going to do with Radiance, put in the correct folder. I'm now going to click on the bottom here, which says Export Manager here, and I'm going to click under Radiance/DateSim. I'm going to click Export Model Data. Now, Radiance, I won't explain to you how it works, but one thing it does do is it's going to create a series of files. So I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop called TS02 Radiance. Do put these folders on your desktop because Radiance doesn't like long folder names. So, and I'm just also with Radiance, keep your names very short. I'm going to call this 1. So it says that as well. It says calling Radiance files long names is going to cause you headaches. Don't do that. So when I press OK, I then get into this wizard. There are lots of these wizards in Ecotect. This is one for Radiance. I'm going to answer a series of questions. The first question I'm going to answer is, what kind of image do I want to generate? Well, we're actually not generating an image first. We're generating a grid, but I'd still want illuminance, lux. So let's press lux there. Next one, what do I want in the lighting analysis? Well, the one I want is this last one, surface or point analysis. That's going to populate my analysis, that blue grid we make. So let's click that. The analysis grid is what we want. Yes, click that. The sky condition that I want is going to be cloudy sky. I will have explained why that's the case in the lecture. You can click that. Of these three things, I'd like you to click the third, which is using Ecotect Sun Angles and Design Sky. We're not going to get an image, so don't worry about that, but you can pick interior views. We're going to unclick these two because I do not want you to make an image at this point. We'll do it in a minute. Unclick those, press next. Let's set it to medium quality. That's enough for this. Now this is really important. When you get to this point, if you do not have every one ticked, it won't work. Now if it doesn't work, you're going to have to do something to make it work. Usually it involves doing this. Press the word fix. When you go to fix, you need to get inside the bin folder. The bin folder is one of those in Radiance. I told you Radiance has to be in C, and in the bin is a folder called, or a file called rad.exe. If you double click on that one, then that should fix all your ticks. And if all your ticks are green, then you can proceed. If they're not, and the fix doesn't work, then I'm afraid we have to come and help you another way. So I've got green ticks, I can go on. Press next, don't worry about this, press next. We finally get to a summary sheet, which tells me different things. I'm going to just change one thing. I don't want any electric lights. I'm just going to turn lights off, even though I haven't defined any electric lights in here. But everything else is fine, and the key thing is I'm generating point data, which is my analysis grid data. So everything's good. I'm going to press OK. When I press OK, again I get that little box. I'll press OK to that. Now this is what Radiance looks like. It's not pretty, but it's going to start grinding away. And what it's doing as it grinds away is it is calculating for each point on your grid what the daylighting level is. It says it's honest, and it says, warning, this could take a while. It does take a while. But when it's done it, this will come up. It says, your Radiance results are now complete. And we're going to say import. And we press import. We don't see anything until we go back to the 3D editor, and now we see something. Now we see, well, we see the grid has been populated with data. So what kind of data has been populated with? Well, we've a scale here in terms of lux. This says what kind of lighting levels we can expect to have. We know that adjacent to the window we can expect on a cloudy day to have around 370, and we know down the back we're falling back towards about 72. There's a few ways you can look at that information. For instance, if I click here on the analysis grid and I scroll to the top, I can look at it not in 2D but in 3D. That allows a slightly more graphic understanding of it. Again, looking at Visualize, I'll see that as an object, in fact, in my room, which kind of helps me understand those values. And if I go back to the cutaway section, I can pull back to show how that all looks within the room. That's kind of useful. But probably the most useful thing is to find out what the average value is, as in what the average in the room is. So if I click here again, there's another little box tick here which says show average value. If I click on that, and if I go back into 3D editor, it gives me an average value in terms of lux. The average value in my room here is about 158 lux, and that's averaged obviously from front or back. So that's the kind of methodology using Radiance as an import to calculate daylighting levels in our room.